Thanks for tuning in to a Nat Scraps post-game edition with the Cubs and Nationals set to play Game 3 in Chicago on Monday. How did we get here, you might ask? It's a good question. I think I've got an answer.
Deep left field. Zobrist's back at the warning track, at the wall. It's gone! It's gone! It's gone! Goodbye! It's a home run! It's a 3-run homer for Ryan Zimmerman!
And so the Washington Nationals and the Chicago Cubs are tied at 2 apiece as they head to Chicago for Game 3 tomorrow. Game 4 set for Tuesday. We'll talk about the Nats Cubs first 2 games with Scott Zolatoro, our baseball analyst, who will be with me tomorrow at noon. In just a couple of minutes as we get started here on Nat Scraps on the Prime Sports Radio Network. All right, so it is a Sunday at noon, Nat Scraps post-game edition on the Prime Sports Radio Network. It's the 8th. And the 8th, a lot better than the 7th as far as our post-game shows, that's for sure. Like night and day, we talked a lot about how the Nats, you can give them a game. Maybe they needed something to get going. Who knows? Got no answers for you. If anybody did, they'd be a millionaire. But willing to give them a game, and it wasn't like it started out pretty because it didn't. So there was still, though, the opportunity with this lineup. We've seen it many times with the Nationals, with their offense, with some clutch players that they have the ability to come back. Of course, not like the Cubs did and have this season or even last season, of course, on their way to a World Championship. But very, very close to that level. You know, this is, again, just a very, very competent, confident team that's done a lot of winning over the last few years. And they've done a lot of winning, again, in clutch situations, coming from behind. So they knew it was in them. It was just a matter of whether or not they were going to be able to put together that sort of a comeback and that sort of an inning before it was too late, and they did. And now we've got ourselves a 1-1 series. All right, so again, Scott Zolatoro is going to join us in just a couple of minutes for the Cubs perspective, but I believe we've got Ken. Ken, are you there?
I am fighting through some weather up here in Vermont today.
All right, so if a little bit of phone communication issues then?
Yeah, no service. I had to find a landline that could work, so I apologize for the sound. It doesn't sound great.
That's all right. It's manageable. Fact is, just like the Nats, it may not have been pretty for a while. But it is a 1-1 series with Game 3 tomorrow. And as we mentioned yesterday, it didn't really matter how they won it. The fact is that to go 1-1 and now to have Scherzer in Game 3, as long as Scherzer is healthy and he can pitch the way we know Max can, all of a sudden you go from a series that was completely controlled by the Cubs and they had the edge going into the bottom of the 8th yesterday, to the fact that the Nats have to have themselves an edge, even though it's in Chicago. But again, Max is one of the top pitchers in the game. But an edge means nothing. They got to go out and they got to play, and Max has got to be healthy. But it just shows you what a quick turnaround it's been in just the last few hours.
I mean, it was the turnaround from 1 second to from being, and that game was over in the 7th inning, and then all of a sudden it just wasn't. So. I woke up this morning and I wasn't sure exactly what had happened. I mean, you know what happened to me last night.
Oh,
so.
Yes. That's a story in itself.
Yeah.
You had some issues, so we can sympathize. But hey, you did have some family obligations. You were hoping to sneak a peek and watch it the new way, you know, with your communication devices. But that didn't work out too well for you, huh?
No, it worked out perfectly. I mean, but it was like a scene from every single sitcom from the 80s and 90s where the big game's on and the guys in the corner, it's like a funeral or a birthday party or a wedding, and the guys still figure out how to watch a game. I had my iPad in between my legs underneath the table, and I was streaming my DirecTV. I saw every pitch until the top of the 8th. when I was at 1% of juice, and my wife was totally on board. Couldn't have been more supportive. And everyone kept coming around to see, and it was 3-1, and it wasn't looking good, and it didn't feel good. And I sat there at the table, and sure enough, within 15, maybe 25 minutes, 3 guys come running. Of course, word gets out. You're in the restaurant, you're doing the family thing, you're watching the game. All of a sudden, people you don't know kind of know what you're doing. And I had about 3 guys run over to me and with their cell phones and putting them in front of my face because they knew I needed to know right away. And I was just the first thing I saw was just a Washington fans going crazy, and I was like, "What do you I get it. We lost. Thanks. I appreciate it. Thanks for rubbing it in." And sure enough, it was the exact opposite, and it just turned into a great night. I mean, what a feeling.
Yeah, well, that's I'm not so sure that's called. You have a weird way of using the word perfect, especially since you missed all the good stuff. Because that could have been a disaster had they actually come over to you and said, "Oh yeah, you're down 2-0, boy."
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, so that would have been a disastrous night, but it was perfect because the Nats won, and that's really all that counts. And it's something that hopefully you'll remember the rest of your life if they can go on and actually win their first ever postseason series. So still a long way to go. I do get the kind of I right now I kind of get the feeling that the Nats are either going to break through or it's going to be another one of those Game 5 home losses. But either way, I think if they're going to break through, they're going to probably have to do it at home. So I can see either a win or a loss in Game 5. And then, as we've talked about before, maybe based on their past history, if they can actually win this one against a great team and the defending champs, maybe that could be exactly what they need to move forward and win an actual World's Championship, which would be something else. But yeah, it's going to be fun now. Hopefully, after for Nats fans, it was pretty boring heading into that 8th. What did we have? Like 4 hits total going into the 8th inning last night.
It was close. Was it 4 hits in 2 games?
Yeah,
I mean, it was
games.
4 hits in 2 games for a while there.
Yeah. So, but anyway, it is what it is. The series is now tied at 1, and the game tomorrow night we'll decide who takes the 2-1 lead. All right, let's welcome in Scott Zalotoro to the program. And Scott, from the Cubs perspective, and again, Scott will be with me tomorrow as our lead baseball analyst here on the network. At noon, we'll take a look at the entire playoffs situation with the 2 American League games taking place today. Cleveland and Houston with an opportunity to end those series. And I don't know, get the feeling that maybe at least one of those series could be over by the time we talk tomorrow, Scott. But we know the Cubs-Nats series won't be over after Game 3. And not surprising that it's 1-1 after 2. This is kind of what we thought. Not of course, how it worked out, but still 1-1 is kind of what we all felt.
So it sounds like I was the exact opposite of Ken. It sounds like I was at the Maryland-Ohio State game, following on my phone. So I missed all of the good stuff for the Cubs. I missed the Contreras homer. I missed the Rizzo homer. I saw them on Twitter like shortly after they happened. Of course, I was at the game Maryland lost 62-14. But it's not a great day yesterday for sports and the life of Scott Zalotoro. But yeah, so I get to the bar. Me and my dad get to a restaurant at during the bottom of the top of the 8th inning. So I see the Cubs bat in the 8th, and then look, I mean, right now a lot of Cubs fans are saying, they put Lester out. Maybe he could have gone another one, but it didn't matter because it was your 8th inning guy, Carl Edwards Jr., CJ, who just really, hung a really bad pitch to an extremely, extremely dangerous hitter. In fact, the only good pitch that a Cub pitcher really threw that entire inning was the pitch that Montgomery threw to Murph that he lined over Ryan's head down the third baseline. Because the pitch that the 1-0 pitch that Montgomery threw to Zimmerman was just awful. Just a flat putter, at 88 miles an hour at the top of the zone. And then, I don't know, to me it looked like Ben Zobrist, if he would have jumped, they had a chance to catch that baseball. But certainly not the way the Cubs thought they would lose that game. Going to their 8th inning guy who's been pretty solid all year. He allows a terrible hanging pitch, and then you have a walk, and then the nice single by Murphy, and then again Zimmerman, had a crazy year. Just beats absolutely on it. So,
yeah, well, fact is that I think as Madden said in the post game, look, we especially when you got guys that have been there and won a world championship and pitchers that have done a really good job for the past couple of years for the organization. It's going to happen, and we sometimes as analysts and fans even we tend to I was watching the post game show for the Cleveland Yankee game, and for the first 10 minutes, it was about everything the Yankees did wrong. And then they finally kind of laughed because they realized, wait a second, we forgot to kind of talk about what a great comeback this was by Cleveland. And that's kind of what happens. Sometimes, should Edwards have been in the game? He's a righty. There's a lefty in the bullpen. And of course, if you knew the Cubs, you knew the fact that Edwards has been an excellent pitcher against lefties this season. He's also their eighth inning guy. So if he's your best pitcher and he's very good against lefties, well then no. I mean that's not a bad call by Maddon in my perspective. And then of course Maddon said what he said. He said, look, it happens. I mean you get beat. And so again, it's not necessarily always the what happened to Edwards, but it's, hey, wait a second. I mean, Harper's like a great player. Hey, what happened to Montgomery? Zimmerman is a very good, maybe the best player in the history of the franchise for Washington. So these things are going to happen, and that's why you need the opposite side sometimes actually to come up and make big plays, and it's not always about errors and bad plays from the opposition.
Yeah, I mean, look, he threw the worst pitch possible. It was, a hanging curve. I think it was definitely either 2-1. I think it was 3-1, the count though. And it was just, he hung it. And Bryce Harper is not going to make a mistake on a slow, or, on an 82-mile-an-hour curveball that is hanging that badly. He's not going to make a mistake. The best case scenario was he was early on it and just yanked it foul. But the worst case scenario is what happened. He had a 430-foot home run. So,
well, you didn't have a problem with Edwards pitching, correct, against Harper?
No, of course. He's been good against lefties, like you said. He's the eighth inning guy. Who else are you going to go to? I mean, look, I understand when you get to the playoffs, you make different changes to pitching. That's normally when you're getting your butt kicked, and they weren't getting their butt kicked. Like you said, they had only allowed 2 hits in that game coming into the eighth, 4 hits in the series coming into that inning. So you stick with what has been working for you all season long. Edwards has been, pretty darn good. So he's your guy. And then look, people were like, oh, Montgomery should have been against Harper. And then, of course, Edwards should have been in against Zimmerman. No, because you're not expecting Zimmerman to even get up in that situation. So you go with your eighth inning guy. I 100% agree with what Maddon did there. Totally not on Maddon. Look, like you said, things happen. It's a really bad pitch and a massive mistake. And unfortunately for the Cubs, I said to my dad last night, that seems like it could be one of those, series-changing moments because, it seemed like the Nats were a fish out of water. It seemed like they were dead, and they were about to get stunned 2 straight games in their home ballpark. And Lester pitched a heck of a game, and everybody looked great. I mean, the Cubs, Rizzo with a big home run to give them the lead. It just seems like things are going so right, and then in a flash, it's so wrong.
Well, yeah, and look, Ken, I think that this series is more than likely going to be like this, like I said, into Game 5s. Even if Scherzer and the Nats win Game 3 and hold on to that momentum, the Cubs, we can easily see the Cubs pulling a Nationals and then turning right back around and coming up with the big hits because they've got the clutch players as well. And that's what I think we didn't know, again, how it was going to unfold, but we had an idea that this was going to be the best series, and it is so far the best series, no doubt, because you take a look at all the other series, and they're potentially all going to be sweeps. So this is the best series. We thought it was going to be the best series. We didn't know how it was going to work out, but we kind of felt that it was going to be big-time players coming out with big-time hits. The Nats did it last night, and I'm sure we're going to see the Cubs do it again at some point.
With all respect to the Indians and the Astros, I think if you were to take the 4 National League playoff teams and play them off against the American League teams, I think they would take it. For Nationals fans, what could be better than surviving and getting a win with Gio in Game 2 and knowing that you're going to throw Max in Game 3? To me, I don't know what Strasburg's capable of. I don't know where he's at, what he can do. But if there's any way he can pitch Game 4, I'm throwing him in Game 4. And I know that doesn't save him for Game 5. I get it. And Greg, you might disagree whether it's a win or a loss when you throw him. into the Chicago's rotation. I mean, that was their big question mark coming into the series. We know they can hit. The idea that, the question was, who are they going to pitch? When are they going to pitch them? You expect to see Hendricks out there as soon as they can possibly get him ready to go back out there. To me, the Nationals have got to capitalize right now in the middle of this series against arms that were the only supposed weakness that Chicago had, and they're a great team, and it's a stretch to use the word weakness, but if you can go Max and Strasburg back-to-back in 3 and 4, to me, you have to.
I don't know.
You don't like that?
Well, with Strasburg, again, in a desperate situation, you may have to think about that if they lose Game 3.
Okay.
But if you win, absolutely not, because of the fact I'm not even sure how much it works out, except unless you go and say, okay, we're down 2-1. We go into Game 4. We're going to pitch Strasburg, and we're only going to ask him to pitch 5 innings because we don't want to damage Strasburg.
No.
Have him pitch a 1 day extra rest is not really what you're looking for in a fastball pitcher. A guy who's had injury issues in his career. I don't even know if he's ever done it, to tell you the truth. And if he's never done it before, then that's a very tricky situation. And but you know what? This is what we talked about at the trade deadline. It's what we talked about for a month leading up into the trade deadline. This is why he went out Rizzo and tried to get Sale last year at the winter meetings. It's why we thought maybe they should go out and get another starter, maybe Verlander, one of those guys, because of this situation. Is what happened. We said it probably 20 times. What if you're down 2-1 in that first round series and you have to pitch Tanner Roark? You're going to be in big trouble. And that's something that hopefully they won't find themselves in. But I think most importantly, Scherzer has got to be Scherzer. So if Scherzer's not Scherzer and he's not the same pitcher that we know he's capable of being, I don't think we go very far in this postseason anyway.
Well, can I jump in for a sec? I mean, if the Cubs win tomorrow and you're saying back against the wall and you're going to pitch Strasburg for just 4 innings, or 5 innings? What's the point, right? 5 innings from him isn't going to win you the game. I mean, it's going to help you for those 5 innings. That's only half a game. Wouldn't you still want to save him for Game 5 regardless?
Well, I got. Our bullpen is probably one of our biggest strengths at this point in time. If I can get through 5, I feel pretty good about going Madsen, Kinsler, Doolittle, and I feel pretty good about figuring out a way to get 3 outs. Before that, 3 months ago, you're absolutely right. But today, if you can get to those 3 guys, they're certainly in our recent history, they're the closest thing we have to a shutdown bullpen rotation that you can have. So, yeah, of course I want Strasburg or Scherzer or Gio for that matter to give us 7 or 8 or that complete game gem. But I just think you look at and maybe it's just a World Series thing. Maybe it's a stop you don't pull out to the World Series, but every year you see a Madison Bumgarner or a Clayton Kershaw or these horse alpha male pitchers just dig down deep. Randy Johnson did it, and he figure out a way to get extra pitches out in meaningful situations. Craig said Strasburg's never done it before. We have no idea if he's capable of doing it. I have no idea how smart it even is. But we have played the conservative card before. We have protected this guy. I'm sure they'll continue to protect him. But there is an edge that you are willing to dance on at this point in the season, and I at least want it to be in the playbook, in the possibility.
Well, we hope actually it's not, because then they would be up 2-1, and then it's an easy answer, and you go to Tanner Roark. But this is actually when we were previewing the series, Scott. We said the Cubs have one significant advantage, and that is the Game 4 starter. Because as we talked about, the Cubs could go 6, actually. The Nats can go 3. That's it. The Nats don't have a number 4 starter. That is a reliable number 4 starter that they can count on. And Tanner Roark has just been very inconsistent this season. This is not the same Tanner Roark from the last couple of seasons, where he's been a little bit better in certain spots and much better in others. That's just something. But you know what? They may look at it as, well, we'll go at Roark, but he's going to be on the shortest possible leash as you could possibly imagine. He's going to go out there in the first inning, and if he gets in trouble, he's out.
I mean, and then look, what happens if let's say it goes to Game 5 after that situation. You have to do the same thing with Gio, maybe. You have to throw him on short rest. And so
well, that's why I'm saying I'm against it. That's why I'm saying I don't see it happening. I'm just saying I wouldn't rule it out, but I don't see it happening.
Ken wants it in the playbook. Ken's like he's leaning towards if the Nats lose tomorrow night, that he won Strasburg throwing in Game 4.
Well, again, it's not the work because again, as we mentioned, I'd go on what they do, and if they felt comfortable and they felt that Strasburg can do it, then I'd be okay. Especially as Ken mentioned, they have been as we all know, they have been very, very cautious with Strasburg, and they threw him out there. Then we would have to believe that they know what they're doing. And then I'd be okay with it. And if they don't, then I would be okay with it, knowing that, I kind of agree with that because it's short rest and all that. But look, this is what happens when you go, and Rizzo's done a great job in everything he's done so far this season. But if they're down 2-1 and Roark pitches Game 4 and they lose, it's going to be the one decision that he failed to make that will ruin their entire season.
Yeah, that's fair. And you mentioned definitely the Cubs. Again, they're going to have a guy who's not 100% of Jake Arrieta. He's going to be probably in the 90s, upper 80s, 90% ready to go on Thursday. But he still is. They get 5-6 innings out of Jake. That's better than having to have this issue of do we throw our guy who is on short rest. The Cubs are definitely in a better situation there. The question is, I mean, for being totally honest, I am terrified of tomorrow night because Scherzer's got a great track record against the Cubs. He's been lights out against them. He's strikes. Look, the Cubs are a high strikeout team, and Scherzer's a strikeout pitcher. So it's really scary for the Cubs to have to go up against them. And they have Quintana, who is probably the fourth of the four that I would trust to go in Game 3. So totally changes everything. Now again, the Cubs last night, they had slightly worse lineup than you would expect they had. They had no John Jay starting. They didn't have Schwarber starting because they're terrified of throwing these lefty hitters in against Gio, which is understandable. Some of those guys didn't even get at bat. John Jay did get a pitching at bat. But, this will be a game against the righty. You'll have the power bat of Schwarber, which just strikes a little bit more fear. You'll have John Jay in there. And so if the Cubs win tomorrow night, again, I said before the series started that I thought maybe it's a high-run scoring series. It's been the exact opposite of that. Obviously, the fewer runs these pitchers have allowed is the lowest scoring series so far, even though there's a 6-2 game or 6-3 game last night. But it'll be very interesting to see what happens with tomorrow night. Again, I'm terrified of going up against Scherzer. And the fact that you guys have held him till Game 3, you think, okay, it's a 1-1 series. He would have pitched in one of those first two games, but you get the benefit of him going to Game 3 in a pivotal game where he can take that 2-1 lead. So that's a big edge. The Game 4 edge right now looks like the Cubs territory, the Cubs' favorite, but still, what is right ahead of you is the Nets.
Yeah, and but as long as Scherzer, then obviously the Nats have the pitching edge, no question about it. They have the momentum. But if Scherzer is off a little bit, we've seen what happens when he's off a little bit, especially with some of the power that the Cubs have. So we'll find that out real early in the game tomorrow that starts at 4 o'clock. Scott, we'll talk to you tomorrow at 12 for our baseball playoff coverage. And then, of course, we'll get you back on here on our Game 4 post-game show. And by then, we'll either have a series winner or more than likely we'll be heading to Game 5.
Sounds good.
All right. Thanks, Scott. That's Scott Solatoro. And by the way, Scott, traveling right now, both of you guys on the road with Scott in West Virginia on the road traveling again. He had that opportunity to go watch Maryland. Unfortunately, you know what happened there with Ohio State, Ken. So he had the opportunity to go there and watch the game. That was a long game for him. And then now he's traveling back. And, of course, you're in Vermont. So both you guys on the road, appreciate you calling in at this time, especially on a Sunday to talk Nats baseball. And for our perspective, of course, much better that they've won this game. And we'll find out how things go tomorrow at 4 o'clock on TBS, Game 4, 5:30 on TBS. And that means tomorrow night we should be able to do a post-game show. What's your schedule tomorrow?
My schedule is getting ready to talk about a Game 3 win with you after the game. I wouldn't say like what is that? Probably somewhere around 8-ish.
Yeah, probably about 8-ish. And then Tuesday night it should be probably about 9-ish, 9:30ish. So that's a possibility as well. So we might, at least that's a good thing. These aren't the late starts, which would have been a little bit crazy doing 1 in the morning post-game shows. But we might be able to do post-game shows the next 2 nights, Monday night and Tuesday night. And let's certainly hope that at least one of them will be good. Because, I get the feeling that either way, this will get decided Game 5. So even if the Nats win, I'm not getting overly excited after Game 3. Not just because of Roark, but like I said, I just get the feeling that the chances are that they're going to get that monkey off their back. They're going to have to do it at home.
Yep.
All right. So, Ken, appreciate it. Oh, by the way, yeah, we never talked about the roster, but the one difference in the roster that we kind of thought could happen. And that's because of the way Sammy Solis had pitched late in the season as he made the postseason roster over Joe Blanton.
Thank God.
No Blanton and no Kelly. Those were situations that we were not looking forward to.
No, I'm ecstatic about that, to be quite honest with you. And Solis had to turn in that performance in September. He was he either was number 1 or tied for number 1 with the lowest ERA, and he had a crazy low WHIP. He had to do that to get his spot, but having that lefty who's healthy come in, to me, getting Blanton out of there is just such a psychological lift. But yeah, I was very, very ecstatic.
Yeah, because there's really nobody in the bullpen now. So even Oliver. He's the one guy that we go, all right, well, but at least we know he's only in there against lefties.
Yep.
He did the job last night, which was huge. And you know what I would like to see? I think they're doing a really bad job. I don't know how the other networks are doing it. I haven't paid full attention to it, but I think TBS is doing a pretty bad job with stats. I mean, they're showing Solis's ERA in stats. It's like, who cares about Sammy Solis's 5.88 ERA when that has nothing to do with why he's made this postseason roster?
I know.
You are misleading people with those stats. Why don't you show how he's pitched in the last month so people know why he's on the postseason roster? Why don't you show why certain pitchers are in there like Oliver Perez against lefties instead of showing his, ERA in the mid-4s? I mean, is that asking too much? I mean, come on, throw a couple of stats in there, or at least, Ron Darling or something like that has got to go out and he's got to make those, he's got to comment on it. He's got to say, just so you know, this is the reason, this is why Sammy Solis is in the postseason roster, et cetera, et cetera. So, but anyway, good job by the bullpen yesterday, and so far. Look, it definitely has been as far as the pitching has done well. I don't think anything has happened with the pitching or even the hitting, except there's only one player between the pitchers and the hitters that we're a little bit concerned about. Trey. That's the one guy in the first 2 games, lineup and pitching, that we're going, okay, Trey, you got to get going. They're starting to boo you, Trey. And you know what? They're getting him on a lot of outside bad pitches.
Yep.
He's reaching on a lot of these ugly off-speed pitches out of the strike zone.
I know. Hey, how about a shout-out to Adam Lind for doing what he's done all season long, coming off the bench. It's just, he's amazing. We were fired up about him in the spring.
Yes, we were.
And this is why.
Yep. And this is what we were hoping for. And that bench is so much better. We've talked about it all year compared to what they had on the bench last year. Who do they have to rely on? Now you've got Lind. I mean, for them to be able to bring up Howie Kendrick at the plate in the 5th inning in a big spot just shows you how deep the bench is. That they can go to a guy like that, that's their right-handed, big-time pinch hitter off the bench, and then still be okay later on when you've got Adam Lind. So,
unbelievable.
Yeah. Now we haven't seen Goodwin yet. But that's another player that I guess we'll see. I mean, I know we saw Robles on the Bates pass, but I was wondering if we were going to see Goodwin, but maybe because of the groin injury, if they're going to use Goodwin, it's probably just more of as a pinch hitter, and maybe a desperation late inning, extra inning type of guy. But anyway, Bottom line is for tomorrow's game, we've got to have Max being old Max. And as I said before, if the Nats are going to go deep in the playoffs, Max is going to have to be Max. So that's it. If Max is Max and we're not sitting there at the end of the series losing, Max has a bad game, the injury is a big issue, and we're going to go, here we go again. It's the injuries. They can't get these guys healthy at the right time. But we'll see. We'll keep our fingers crossed tomorrow, because tomorrow's game is, especially because of the performance of Max, will probably dictate the national season. So, Ken, I appreciate your time. We'll talk on Monday, probably sometime around 8 o'clock-ish, right after the Cubs-Nationals game that starts at 4 o'clock. Looking forward to it. Are you still going to be in Vermont?
No, I'll be at home base watching tomorrow's game.
All right. So, by the way, if there is a Game 5, are you going?
The quick answer is I better be going. I'll figure out a way to get there somehow, some way.
All right, Ken. Awesome. Appreciate it. Enjoy the rest of your time in Vermont, and we'll talk to you tomorrow.
All right, Craig. Looking forward to it, man.
Me too. All right. That's Ken Marangolo, First Amendment Sports. By the way, you can follow both Ken and Scott on their Twitter handles. With Scott, it's at @SZolatoro, and with Ken at It's Raining Ken. All right, so don't forget to check out us on our Twitter handle at PrimeSN. That's where you can find out all of our up-to-date schedules, on-demand shows, when they're available, and much more. And our next show, well, for this one, we know is going to be tomorrow at 4. Tomorrow around 8 o'clock tomorrow night. But we have a big schedule tomorrow. 12 o'clock, our baseball show with Scott. Football coverage at 5, Jets Confidential Radio. Arled's Football Network at 6. And then the Nat Scraps post-game show tomorrow night. For Scott Zolatoro, Ken Marangolo, and Greg DePalma, we'll see you next time on Nat Scraps.